just talk about him and his relationship with Charlie Kirk, because I agree that, I mean, first of all, it was a shocking death to everybody, right? Not just Donald Trump, but for Trump, who had himself a brush with, as we said, not one, but 2 assassination attempts last year. I wondered if it had triggered something for him. I mean, we have no idea if he's ever suffered post-traumatic stress disorder from what was a close shave with death. We know he went straight into the RNC after that, and he seemed buoyed up by it. But sometimes PTSD takes months or years to actually bubble to the surface.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I mean, the whole story of the assassination attempt last year was kind of weird. And, was he shot? Was he not shot? What hit him? Why didn't he go to a doctor? And all that, there were legitimate questions about it, but clearly it impacted him deeply. Yet there was something else that came out about all of this that I think is interesting, because most of the commentary has been, from the right, well, this must have been somebody from the left, and Trump fanning the flames of that. From the left being, no, this isn't that. And now then you see the guy, and he's the son of a sheriff from a religious Republican family. And the things that were written on the bullets were not ideological. They were gamer phrases that he'd picked up, as a gamer. And then you think of him, and you think of the guy who shot at Trump allegedly in Pennsylvania. You think of
Thomas Matthew Crooks.
Right. You think of the guy they found in the bushes in Florida. You think of most of the shooters that you see. And a lot of them, what should be worrying to more people about them is they're not political. These are alienated 20-something males who are online too much, who are mentally not very healthy, and that have too much access to guns. And that, so, a lot of them go and they gravitate towards political violence because it's visible, because that's what people are talking about. But I don't know if we're interpreting what's going on quite right. Yes, we are in a very divided moment. But if we want to get to the root causes of the violence, it's something else. It's a pathology within our society, but it's not as political as people say it is.
What do you mean it's a pathology in our society? And can we relate this? I was actually very heartened by Governor Cox at the press conference this morning when they announced the arrest of Tyler Robinson. I thought, he went through his usual spiel of explaining that they'd got the alleged guy. And then he came back and talked about how this could be the end of a dark moment, or it could be the beginning of an even darker moment. And he talked about Democrats and Republicans getting together. And I thought he threaded the needle by mentioning Trump in a way to acknowledge Trump, something I think as a Republican governor you had to do, but then went on to be completely un-Trumpian. And I thought, if I were J.D. Vance, I would be watching this guy. This is a candidate Cox emerging. But he referred to the 60s. He said he was born in 1975, but he grew up understanding that the 60s had been this incredibly dangerous decade. We had 3 assassinations, obviously JFK, then his brother RFK, and then Martin Luther King. Can you put this in a sort of historical context? And I'm not suggesting you're so old as to remember that. I'm sure you were. I think you were born in the 80s, David. I think you were born in the 80s. But it wasn't it wasn't a very violent time.
Take your best shot at me. I can handle it. Okay. I'm from New Jersey. I'm used to being able to handle that kind of stuff.
Oh, you're Michael Wolff. You're always claiming the New Jersey defense.
Well, it's a distinction. If you can survive Jersey, you can survive anything. But in terms of this, because you asked 2 questions effectively there.
I think I asked 3 or 4 questions.
Well, let me just break it into 2 parts. As far as the pathology goes, I'm not a shrink. My daughter's a psychotherapist, and I've learned something from her. And, I think one of the things that we understand about pathologies is there are many contributing factors. The fact that we're country that's got more guns than people, and we're the only developed country like that. We have a unique set of challenges to our society, and 50,000 people or 40,000 people dying every year of gun deaths. That's a part of it.
I think it's 100,000 die a year from gun deaths.
Well, I think that may be our victims, but I don't know. You may be right. But the point is this: higher than any other developed country by a lot. Why? Because there are 100 million more guns in the country than there are people. So that's one thing. I think another thing is that we do have a lot of people who are alienated, disconnected, victims of being online too much, and we totally underserve people with mental health in the United States. We don't provide them with mental health care, money, and so on and so forth. And then there is this culture of violence, which sort of connects to your other question, where our political dialogue has been infused with violence. It was just a week ago, the president was, positioning a meme of himself saying, he was going to go to war with Chicago. He uses the language of war. He changed the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War. The only thing Pete Hegseth likes to talk about is lethality. And, Trump is talking about, the left as being violent lunatics and so forth. And so that contributes to the pathology in this country. The governor of Utah tried to counteract that in some respects. He sounded in some respects very much like a typical Republican politician in mentioning scripture and he was sort of playing to the base. But he did something very different from Trump, and you're right to point it out. He said, we didn't have looting. We didn't have riots. We talked to one another. We listened to one another. We came together. And it's time that we need to all come together as a country. And Trump presented with the exact same opportunity on Fox News this morning, where they said, well, there are people on the right and on the left that do this. He said, no, the ones on the right, they just want us to fight crime. It's the ones on the left who are dangerous that worry me. So Trump is a voice of division. And you raise a really good question, which is, are people getting sick of this? Do they see the violence in this? Are they looking for something different? J.D. Vance is like a barnacle, just doing whatever Trump does, sticking to his side, and mimicking the words of division of Trump. But is there room for a Republican? Is there room for a Democrat that says this division is a big problem and we have to find a way to heal the division? Because I think a lot of Americans believe that. It was a different kind of sounding GOP leader. And it was encouraging. I think one can take some hope from that, because surely we have a problem. And it is like the 60s. There is this kind of craziness in the land of people going out and acting out their anger, that leaves a death toll and leaves many other victims.
Well, and the rhetoric is amplified by social media, right? Which there wasn't in the 60s. Do you think that? Well, what do you think China and Russia are thinking as they look at this?
They couldn't be happier. What they're seeing is the United States, their principal rival, the principal counterbalance to their power, getting weaker and weaker with each passing day. They see the president of the United States embroiled in a sex scandal. They see the president of the United States aging and not handling it. They see the president of the United States without any expert advisors bumbling his way through global affairs. They see the U.S. economy, which for most Americans is the big story of the week. Prices are going up. It turned out, we also learned this week that we actually created 1 million less jobs than we thought we had. The economy could be heading for stagflation, kind of a condition that's bad for everybody, but nobody knows how to solve it. And they say, well, they're falling behind. Xi Jinping, meanwhile, having big parades, having summits, gaining power. Putin tests Trump. Every couple of weeks, he tests Trump. This incursion into Poland was a test of Trump. And every single time, Trump fails the test. Or he succeeds from Putin's point of view. But even today on Fox News, he was like, well, the Poles shot down the drones. That's why they landed in Poland. And you go like, holy mackerel. Are you kidding me? That's the problem. If they had only not shot down the drones, and there were scores and scores of drones. And he's like, well, it could have been an accident. They may not have meant for it to be there. And immediately the Poles are like, no, they mean for it to be there. And, finally, the problem with that is, why are the Russians are testing for a reason. The reason is they want to see where they can advance next. If they do advance next, whether we are engaged or not, and they're likely to advance because of our own weakness, there is going to be a war on a scale that no one has seen for 80 years. And the weakness of the American president, like the weakness of appeasers that came before him, and that's what he was doing on Fox News this morning. It looked like a morning chat, right? But he was appeasing the Russians. That could lead to consequences that will make us forget everything else you've talked about in the course of this pot.
Wow. What are your sources in the diplomatic arena in other countries? What are they telling you about how America presents at this point?
Well, I think it's a little bit like what we've talked about in the past. What I'm hearing is that they don't trust us. And so while they go in and they flatter Trump sometimes, or they try to deal with Trump and Rubio, in much the same way you'd sort of humor an older relative who's losing it, they're all planning to go their own way. They're all becoming less dependent on the United States and more dependent on one another. Now, in some respects, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe the U.S. had too much influence. But from the point of view of all these other countries, the U.S. was the foundation of Pax Americana. The U.S. was the basis that have kept us from having a world war for 80 years. And with that gone, and with people wanting to test the limits of what they can do, like Putin, like Netanyahu, like perhaps Xi Jinping, it's super dangerous to have a void where once you had the world's most powerful nation. And they all fear that.